the announcement of a literal standard legal Mox from Cons of Tarkir, as well as the final Universes Beyond collaboration being Avatar: The Last Airbender, we got a lot of news coming out of MCChicago. Alongside a first look at the artwork for Egde of Eternities, Magic's first space theme set that is an Acorn based, I want to go over the news from this past weekend's Magic Con, as well as go over some of the cards and combos that you might want to be looking out for, and some of the theory crafting you already want to get your head wrapped around. I mean, outside of cards coming down the line, we get a lot of play with cards currently with this past weekend's Pro Tour as well at the event, the main event where Matt Nass won in the most Matt Nass way possible, as our combo player triple checked his math in a rather complicated close nail biter domain mirror, where he ultimately, as I mentioned, came out on top in a crazy swing at a huge number. But let's focus on some spoilers here. If you want to see more videos like this, then leave a like down below and let me know what cards I missed, because a lot of these cards that we know are coming down the line will still have some support that we've yet to see, because we obviously don't have the full sets yet. And if your excitement isn't piqued by the literal announcement of Dragonstorm in the standard format, and no, not this Dragonstorm, this Dragonstorm, Stormscale Scion is red and 4 for a 4/4 flying dragon that says other dragons you control get +1/+1, and it has Storm. One of the things that really bothers me about so many arena players is the fact that they will do anything and everything to break the client. And for all the 1000-year Storm players, I know they're just oogling and ogling in some way, shape, or form, where they can create 50,000 million of these creatures and put them out. They work really well together. Of course, it doesn't have legendary, or the whole Storm thing wouldn't work unless they put some type of thing on there where the legendary rule doesn't count for that. I don't know, it would just be a little redundant, but I guess it would make it so that you would have Storm literally in your command zone. So there probably is a way that they could have done it, they just didn't bother. But regardless, it's a lord that can make your other dragons bigger. It has Storm. Now, really off the top of my head, this is kind of difficult because dragons aren't really meant to storm off with. Notably, this card doesn't have haste with it. So ideally in older formats, if you had some type of haste enabler, I don't know, in Commander, if you're putting something like an Anger in your graveyard, then you could make something like this work alongside other dragons. But really, this would be like a Storm payoff and not like a dragon payoff. Dragons tend to be fairly costed. You can sometimes get them down maybe a turn or two earlier, but you are really casting one at a time. That's the thing with dragons. They have a lot of abilities. You're either casting them one at a time or getting out a bunch at once, but you're not like casting a bunch in a turn. So this card again will likely be a Storm Spellslinger payoff that can work on the battlefield and can be a really interesting one. In this case, it's a creature. It's kind of interactable in a lot easier sense, but because it has Storm, you kind of add like a bunch of extra copies. So even if that first initial copy is like dealt with, it can be dealt with in the same way that like Goblin Warrens can. I hope I'm naming the right card here. The one that creates 2 1/1 goblins and it has Storm. Now, could that potentially be replaced by something like this? I don't think so, because that's an instant or sorcery that gets reduced by other effects that reduce instant and sorceries. This doesn't really do that, but hey, maybe there's a world where Modern Ruby Storm can force this as well, because a bunch of 4/4 dragons that could potentially have haste in certain red payoffs could be pretty good. So I'm going to be looking out for something like this. I'm not saying it's exactly modern playable, but the fact that it's a creature with Storm, someone is going to try and force it, especially because it's standard legal. Now, when it comes to the Mox itself, Mox Jasper, 0 mana for a legendary artifact, add 1 mana of any color, activate only if you control a dragon. That's right, folks, we have found a way. We have found a way to make the Mox legal in all formats. We've figured it out. It's not just about forcing it into Modern Horizons formats with random, random restrictions. We just have plain restrictions like this. So we could make Mox ears and make it so add 1 mana of any color, but you can only activate if you control an elf. I don't know, Mox ears, Mox force, I don't know, something like that. We can make literal Mox that do this. This opens up a floodgate for me. In terms of design, this shows me that we are able to print reserve list level cards with just a little bit of restriction, and we can make that work, which I think is a good direction for this game. I think is good, because if we cannot solve the reserve list issue, then we might as well make reserve list cards that are, in the spirit of those cards, similar to those cards, but have these wild restrictions so that they're not overly played everywhere. Now Mox Jasper definitely has that restriction. It's not going to go in like different artifact based strategies. It's not going to go in all the Mox Opal decks as we've seen with like Mox Amber. It's not going to be like Mox Amber at all. It's very restrictive. So the things that we first have to look at are the different type of Moxes that there already are in terms of their restrictions. So we have something like Mox Tantalite that's like not playable at all. So spend 3 for 0, and then after 3 turns you get like a Mox. People are trying cascading into this stuff. There's like a world where something like this works. I think Spike had like a combo deck with like Belcher going, or was it like some type of dice factory? I don't know. It was making some type of way a while ago. Mox Amber is probably the most recent one that like works because you add 1 mana of any color among legendary creatures or planeswalkers you control. So the balancing factor here is firstly you have to have another legendary creature and or planeswalker, so it can't be a legendary permanent. And then you actually have to have that on the field. It's not that you know, you are restricted to being able to cast this and only use it to cast those type of spells. You have to have that out. And then unlike the Mox Jasper where you can add 1 mana of any color, Mox Amber only allows you to add mana of that permanent's color. So for example, in the combo deck that's in Modern with Breach, you really are probably only casting this for blue because Emery, Lurker of the Lock, is probably your legendary permanent, or something like oh my god, the Tamiyo is your permanent as well. So something like that. Those are usually your permanents that you're looking to cast. So it's usually tapping for blue in the case of Mox Amber, but pretty restrictive yet really powerful because especially with the printing of Tamiyo, something like Mox Amber, just like its stonks just skyrocketed in terms of playability. Chrome Mox, a little bit of a more older format type of card, banned in Modern, legal in Vintage and in Legacy. I actually just noticed that Scryfall added a new green color for like a Game Changer in Commander, which is okay. I'm just noticing that now. Shout out to Scryfall for making changes like that. But this one, when it enters, you have to exile a non-artifact, non-land card from your hand. So usually it's not going to be another Chrome Mox. Probably is something like one of your permanents, one of your spells, but you are down 2 cards to be able to enable something like this. Something like Mox Diamond, when it enters, you may discard a land card instead. If you do Mox Diamond, if you do put it onto the battlefield, if you don't, it enters the graveyard. So again, another card that has that restriction of you have to lose a card. This specifically has to be a land, so it kind of acts as that land drop, but you're spending 2 cards to do that, so it does have that restriction. But again, still really powerful in older formats, not legal in any way in Modern, Legacy, Vintage, Commander, Game Changer. Now Mox Opal, as we all know, recently unbanned in the Modern format, legal in many powerful formats, definitely one of the most powerful Mox ever printed in terms of widespread playability, really easy to enable. Many of my CDH players will be familiar with something like that. And now we have Mox Jasper, so kind of showcasing a bunch of them that already exist outside of the original Power 9 Mox. Mox Jasper has that big restriction to it. So we want to look at dragons, because when it comes to enabling something like Mox Amber, we're looking at like 1 or 2 CMC converted mana costs like permanents, 2 mana planeswalkers, 1 mana legendary creatures. We don't have 1 mana planeswalkers yet. So we want to look at dragons first. What are the type of dragons that we can use to enable something like this, and is it even good? Well, if you do a Scryfall search of converted mana cost 2 or less dragons, unfortunately we don't have a lot of good options. So Corlessa Scale Singer I specifically want to bring up, which is hidden by my camera right now, so let me just kind of hide my camera here. Corlessa is blue and green for a 1/4. Unfortunately, it came out of the Commander set, so we're not going to be able to use it in something like Standard or Modern, but it is an option that enables both Mox Amber and something like Mox Jasper. Skilled Nurture is also another unfortunate one where you spend mana to, you can tap it for mana, spend it to cast a dragon spell, you gain 2 life, but again, coming out of the Commander set, not something we're going to be able to use here. But if we take a look at other playable cards, such as the Slumbering Dragon or Sprite Dragon. Slumbering Dragon is the only 1 mana dragon that we have right now. It's a 1 mana 3/3, but can't attack or block unless it has 5 or more 1/1 counters on it. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, put a 1/1 counter on Slumbering Dragon. So you have to take some amount of risk, some amount of damage to enable something like this. It's not even legendary, which makes this a little tough because it doesn't enable Mox Amber. You want to look to enable multiple of these at the same time to be able to abuse it. And then finally, say the last one, that the card that actually probably sees play, if I'm going to be honest, is something like Sprite Dragon. This card sees on and off play in like different versions of prowess, especially when you cast a non-creature spell, you put a 1/1 counter on Sprite Dragon. And so this is a permanent buff that the prowess decks wouldn't usually get. So this one's kind of nice. It has that haste. And also, if you were to play future copies of Mox Jasper, it does kind of like add more counters to it. And then Mox Jasper can add multiple other colors, making the mana base a little bit smoother for something like this. Although it's not necessarily too hard, Sprite Dragon tends to be the one card that makes it like the blue that makes it a little tough, or you're probably adding in Spell Pierce to something like Is It Prowess. But regardless, there aren't too many options. One thing I will caveat this with is if they're printing Mox Jasper, I think Wizards of the Coast is very aware that you need something to enable that card. So there will likely be like a 1-mana Sarkhan or something like that, a 1-mana really bad dragon to enable something like this. I'd be very surprised if they didn't print something like that to enable it. It'll probably be the only one. There'll probably be a suite of 2-mana dragons as well. So there will be other permanents that will be able to enable Mox Jasper. For now, we don't have great options in this case, but we will coming down the line. Now, one kind of permanent type that we're forgetting is all permanent types, and that's the idea that Changeling also are dragons. Notably, the two changelings that I think of off the top of my head that have been old changelings, I'm going to ignore the new one that we're going to talk about in a second. Changeling now casts as one, creatures of all type, so it is a dragon as well, and then it can't be blocked. And then Changeling Moth Dust, tap an untapped creature you control, it gains flying until the end of turn. Not that exciting. I think Changeling Outcast is the more common one just because it can't block or be blocked, so it's just a good way to get damage in. But also, out of the Modern Horizons set, we have something like Universal Automaton. 1 mana, this creature is any type, it's an artifact creature, so it helps enable Mox Jasper, but with Mox Jasper out and this out, you have 2 artifacts. You could play a Mox Opal at that point, and then you have 3 artifacts to enable the Opal and the Jasper. So that's something that a lot of folks are talking about in terms of enabling something like this. I think if this card really goes somewhere in terms of older formats, you know, I believe this is the first legal Mox when it comes to Pioneer as well. So I think cards like this are going to be really important. Like Universal Automaton obviously isn't Pioneer legal, but when it comes to modern legality, if we get that 1-mana dragon and something like Universal Automaton, then that's going to be important. But then when it comes to Pioneer, we're really going to be looking at that 1-mana dragon to enable its usability. I imagine in that dragon deck, we would probably also be getting like Unsettled Mariner. This is a card that just, you know, gives your spells like kind of functional ward and everything. So that's really cool in terms of just protecting your stuff from single target removal. Board wipes are at an all-time low these days. Decks tend to be more tempo based. You need to ping off like key creatures or deal with like very key specific permanents. So again, board wipes aren't at an all-time high. Unsettled Mariner, if there was a way to enable it, if a humans deck was really good, Unsettled Mariner would be good in that. So these are cards that I want to mention in terms of ways to enable the Mox Jasper. I would still hold up and wait for Tarkir Dragonstorm to provide us that enabler, as I was saying, and potentially provide us some enablers for that Dragonstorm card as well. So look out for that down the line. Now, the last card I want to talk about from Tarkir Dragonstorm is going to be Skirmish Rhino. A very easy callback to a card, but let's read it first. White, black, and green for an Abzan 3/4 trample Rhino. When this creature enters, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So yes, it has the commander text on it. Each opponent, you could have this enter and deal 6 damage and you gain 2. Not bad for 3 mana, but obviously being a 3 mana 3/4 with trample, this is a callback to Siege Rhino, a 4 mana 4/5 with trample, and says when it enters, each opponent loses 3 and you gain 3. Now, look, they got Siege Rhino's little brother, they got Siege Rhino's little cousin, and whether or not this is going to be super good, who knows? It's just a cool callback. And I imagine there's going to be plenty of this. We already saw like a legendary, is it a legendary enchantment? We got a white enchantment that's like a callback to Alesha, that like on your upkeep, you get like to return some like 2 or less power like creatures. It's really cool. There's some like really cool callbacks to it, and I know there's going to be plenty of that. We got confirmation like Sidisi is coming back as well, but Sidisi is not going to be like leading her clan or her con. And so when it comes to cards like that, it's going to be really cool to get the call back to the old legendaries, the old cards. And I think that nostalgia baiting is going to be really important in the success of a set like this. So really excited to see different multicolor support for this. You know, the triomes themselves are really difficult to actually print into a set like this. So I'm actually really interested to see how they will enable multicolor shenanigans in the set. I'm kind of predicting a new land cycle, because if you remember, the triomes are kind of locked to two different sets. You have not Kaladesh, it's Kaldheim, and the mobster set, the mob set. Someone's gonna let me know in like the comment section down below. Streets of New Capenna, there you go. Streets of New Capenna and Kaldheim are where the triomes are locked to. Now, do we get like a new kind of enabler for this set? I think like we will have to in the long term. Like if we look at some, I don't even know, like we'd have to look at like something. Like, how would we enable something like this without a triome? Triomes are the first thing that come to mind. Are you printing shocks? Are you printing fetches into this? Fetches in standard? Yo, fetches in standard would go crazy. Fetches in standard would unironically go crazy. I would actually buy standard. I would unironically spend so much money on standard because I'm a fetch land elitist. I love fetch land formats, but fetch lands in standard or triomes are the only ones I can think of. But to be fair, I never would have thought of triomes before. Like I think a new land type will come out, or they will have to print fetch lands in standard, because the triomes are like kind of locked to two other sets based on their naming conventions. I don't even know. There's just so many. Like if we look at like hideout here, I think not broker's hideout. Like hideout isn't the card I'm thinking of. Like if, I don't know, let's go to Streets of New Capenna. Can we like get like a land out of this? Where is it? We're gonna go through. There's something, actually I could just pick on any card. These cards aren't standard legal actually. Yeah, they're definitely not standard legal. So that's the thing I wanted to check. So the triomes are not standard legal in that case. So with that in mind, how are we supposed to enable these multicolor shenanigans? We're not getting the triomes back. We got to get fetches. So definitely something I wanted to theory craft when it came to that. Now, one of the cards that I didn't get to mention last week, I think a lot of you had your time to think about this, but for some reason, I don't know why the price of this is like absolutely insane in terms of pre-order. It's like $70, $80. I don't know how we're pre-ordering this. We don't have singles yet. The set symbol, 10 out of 10, by the way, 10 out of 10 set symbol, but 1,000 Needles. Jumbo Cactuar is a 7-mana 1/7 creature plant. Whenever this creature attacks, it gets plus 9999. It becomes a 1007, flavorfully so, until the end of turn. So how do we break this? How do we break this? Not 1,000, sorry, it becomes a 10,000. 10,000 needles, it becomes a 10,000 0. How do we break a card like this? This has everyone's thing turning, because a lot of people are going back and forth. There was a small little Twitter discussion going on about like whether or not something like this even makes sense, whether or not this breaks flavor, in the sense that, you know, it's kind of like a really large, unambiguous like number. Like, is this just like functionally infinite, and should they have just called this infinite? Is this flavorful or fun to be able to have like a hard, like large number like this? And I think this is kind of breaking that type of boundary. Similar to how we have like Edge of Eternities come out, I feel like the Acorn set where we got like the Shocklands and those like space themed art, that was like a soft feeler for eventually doing Edge of Eternities down the line. I can imagine something like this as a soft feeler for doing things like this down the line. So this is something that we have to look out for in terms of breaking. So first and foremost, we can do something cool like greater good. So you get your attack in. If your opponent has some way to kill it or block it, you sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to that creature's power, then discard 3 cards. So you can draw out your whole deck. Do you have 10,000 cards in your deck? No, you don't. You're going to draw out your whole deck. Okay, so there you go. Great. If you have the ability to draw out your whole deck, and you would lose on the spot if you didn't have something to do something about it, then you could play a Thassa's Oracle. Then, I don't know, flash out a Thassa's Oracle. Well, actually, it has until the end of turn. So on your second main, you can play a Thassa's Oracle in response to the trigger, cast Greater Good. Not cast Greater Good, sack the creature to Greater Good. Already have it out on the field. And then, like, win from there, I guess. No, but then you would lose instantly. Thassa's Oracle line doesn't work. Sorry, ignore me. You'd be looking at, like, something like Laboratory Maniac or Jace to be able to win that way. You could source the Plowshare in. There's other ways to do this, but you can gain 10,000 life. Point it at yourself. There are probably other ways to like gain life equal to the power of creature. Look, just play Swords to Plowshares, a little bit of removal. You can point it at your own creature, gain 1,000,000 life. Essence Harvest is a way for target player to lose X life and you gain X life. So there you go, adding, you can gain the life and you can kill someone instantly, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control, and you don't lose the creature. So that's the great part about this card. Sorcery Speed, you don't lose this creature. Fling is another easy one. You have to actually sacrifice the creature, but it deals it to any target. For some reason, something has 10,000 toughness. You can kill that as well. There you go. You got Fling. Pathbreaker Ibex is another one where this is like a great way to abuse and make your board like mega large. So you can stack your triggers in this way. So if this creature attacks and then the Cactuar attacks as well, you can stack the triggers in such a way where Cactuar's trigger resolves first and it gains 10,000 power. Then Pathbreaker's trigger resolves and it gives everything. Plus 10,000, plus 10,000. And so then that actually like buffs your board as well, because Pathbreaker Ibex gives a toughness boost as well, which is important. So not only will your Cactuar go to like 20,000, but it'll also get a toughness of like 10,007, and alongside the rest of your board they will get like 10,000 as well. So something like Pathbreaker Ibex is like really cool alongside cards like that. So probably a really common combo that you'll be seeing in your commander decks. Alter Dementia, gotta show love to my mill folks out there. Sacrifice a creature, target player mills cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power. Come on, mill someone out instantly. Mill someone. Mono green mill. Someone hit me with that mono green mill in the comment section down below. Build that list for me. Build that list for me. Now, the next one I want to talk about is Edge of Eternities, the space theme set. And we're getting to look at some of the artwork here. Now, I wanted to showcase like this artwork specifically because it's so like Dune inspired. Like look at these like characters just running. This feels like a still suit or a Sardaukar suit. Like look at the helmets. Now, obviously, I'm not saying they're copying Dune. Like so much of Dune's imagery and the way it was written was kind of like paving the way back when it was written. But even now, some of the imagery is kind of based off of some of the very familiar sci-fi imagery that we see in Star Wars and other TV shows that we watch. And so in many ways, of course, we're going to get this like overhead themed helmet. We've seen these in like Halo as well. So I really like the fact that like it kind of goes back to that high fantasy type of space theme that something like Dune obviously has. It just reminds me of that scene where in one of Paul's flashbacks from the movies where like he's running, he has that helmet kind of flip up and he sees that you see a bunch of like the Fremen running as well. I just think it's so Dune coded. I love it. So just wanted to give that Sardaukar shout out. There's plenty of artwork as well. I'm going to link that tweet that I originally showed down below because in response to that tweet, they showcase some of the artwork as well. So feel free to look through that. The big thing I wanted to point out is with all these discussions about Moxes as well, they are going to be bringing back Tezzeret in this, which is very like, it makes a lot of sense. Tezzeret really is that like sci-fi high fantasy type of character. And when you look at Tezzeret as a character, throughout Magic's history, it's been all about artifacts. I played against Tezzeret Agent of Bolas. I played against, I played against Tezzeret the Schemer, Tezzeret the Seeker as well. I played Tezzeret's Gambit. Like so many of these Tezzerets are all about like artifacts, whether or not it be creating artifact creatures, turning things into artifacts, like creating Thopters, like drawing and discarding artifacts, like some type of artifact synergy. And so with that, I can imagine if you're printing a standard legal Mox, you could be printing powerful artifact synergies as well. And so could you play out like a Mox Jasper and then like you have that out for free and Mox Jasper doesn't end up being like some type of use in terms of Mox, but it could be a free way to like, you know, up until the end of your next turn, target artifact you control becomes a 5/5 creature in addition to its other types. So it could be a great way to just like attack into them. So I wanted to point that out. We are getting Tezzeret back. We're getting him in a sci-fi high fantasy setting, but also if they're printing Mox into standard, I can imagine there are other artifact synergies coming in to assist with Tezzeret. I can imagine blue, black, or Dimir based artifacts are going to be potentially a theme coming down the line, especially with as we see some affinity synergies coming out of Aether Drift. Standard affinity. We're bringing back we are bringing back some of the most broken mechanics in all of Magic's history. Storm and Mox and affinity. These are all standard legal, by the way. All of these are standard legal. Getting Tezzeret to potentially help with that. I'm just saying. Hey, don't shoot the mess. I'm just saying. Stormscale, bah humbug. Don't worry about any of that. Don't worry about any of that. How do we sell sets? We introduce every single mechanic on the Stormscale. We're gonna get Dredge eventually. Come on. We're somehow gonna get Dredge in standard. It's gonna happen. I can't wait. Now, the last thing I want to talk about Avatar The Last Airbender as a set. I'm just gonna remove my camera for a second just so y'all can see like the image. I really like the planeswalker symbol being like co-opted into like this type of imagery. It's like kind of cool. And the release date is November 21st. And one of the things I want to shout out with something like this is actually a really great time to be announcing this, because I believe this year is the 20th anniversary of the Avatar The Last Airbender kind of IP, the first episode releasing and everything. And we actually have a new Avatar series announced down the line. It's going to be after Legend of Korra, kind of looking at the implications of that series. So I think this is a great time for all of y'all to get on board with that. Watch the original Avatar series. Legends of Korra was so sick. A lot of hate for that, but there was a lot of cool storytelling elements that have like a lot of long-term implications. And again, we're finally getting a third series that's coming down the line that is going to talk about some of those implications in a whole new world with a whole new Avatar. So I'm kind of excited to see how they showcase that. Like, is there going to be characters or settings that they take from that future show down the line to create some hype? Is it only going to be Legends of Korra and like kind of the Aang original Avatar The Last Airbender series? What are we going to get down the line for that series? And with the series we've already had, some of the great villains, some of the characters that we already know and love, there's gonna be legendary versions of them. It's just gonna be really cool. Like, we're probably gonna get like Appa as like a mount, where we might get like the legendary earthbender turtles as like a mount. Or no, it wasn't turtles, what am I saying? It was the earthbender, it was like those blind animals. Oh my god, it was so top coated. I love that. I love that little arc. Yeah. Like, anyway, those animals, I'm forgetting the series. See, I need a refresher myself, but I'm personally excited to see a little bit of bloodbending reference. I personally thought Avatar The Last Airbender could have been a little bit more adult, and it was going in that direction, and it already had those themes in there as well, but it had to be marketed as like a kid's show. But I think with the Legend of Korra, there was a lot more kind of more adult themes introduced, which I really liked. One of my favorite parts about it was taking things to the extreme. Like, all the bending elements had like a level 2 to it. So fire bending had like lightning, and earth bending had metal bending because you had like ores in them. And air bending, I forgot what air bending was. Was it just the fact that mans could fly? Like, you could take someone's breath away and like mans could fly. That's what it was. And water bending, yo, blood bending, no, shout out to everyone down below. Let me know what y'all were thinking about blood bending. When I was seeing blood bending, I was tripping balls. I was like, this is the sickest thing I've ever seen ever. Anyway, comment section down below, sound off down there. That is the last thing I wanted to talk about. A lot of excitement from this past weekend. Let me know what I missed. Let me know what you're excited for. Let me know if I misspoke at any point. Let me know how you're feeling about Magic for the next year of 2025.